The Dark Eldar, also known as the Judi, are a sadistic and cruel race, known for their mastery of pain and torture. They are the ultimate villains of Warhammer 40K, and they are about to get a new home in the form of a tabletop wargame. But before we get to that, let's take a look at what makes the Dark Eldar so terrifying. The story of the Dark Eldar is one of damnation and despair. Once a proud and noble race, they were corrupted by the very essence of the warp and became twisted beyond recognition. They are now known as the cruelest race in the galaxy, with a lust for power and domination that knows no bounds. Their home city, Commorragh, is a place of impossible beauty and unimaginable horror. It is a city carved from the dark side of the Webway, a labyrinthine network of extra-dimensional tunnels that connect the galaxy. Only the most skilled navigators can find their way through the Webway, and only the most desperate would willingly enter such a dangerous place. Welcome to Commorragh, the city of 1,000 sorrows. Here, cruelty is not a sin. It's a way of life. And with that, we come to the end of our Dark Eldar lore dump. They were not the saviors of their people, nor the remnants clinging to tradition. They were the carrion crows, feeding on the death of their own empire. Welcome to my channel. All across the galaxy, rumors abound of an ancient race of elves, the Eldar, who once dominated the Milky Way. Yet somehow their influence has waned to the point where entire star systems have forgotten their name. But here in the shadowy realm of the Webway, their legacy lives on, twisted and corrupted by millennia of bloodshed and excess. For this is the story of the Drukhari, and this is the tale of how they fell. In the days before the fall, the Aeldari Empire stretched across the galaxy, a sprawling realm of unimaginable beauty and decadent excess. At its peak, Aeldari culture had achieved perfection. Its zenith. Magnificent works of art adorned every palace. Their music echoed across the stars. Their fashions were the height of elegance, and their pleasure craft, the envy of every hedonistic species in the galaxy. But for all their many refinements, the Aeldari had one fatal flaw. A weakness that would bring about their ruin and give birth to one of the most sadistic and enduring civilizations in the Milky Way. For the Aeldari were a people defined by their senses, a sensual people who reveled in the finer things in life. And while such a philosophy can lead to great art and exquisite taste, it also leads to decadence, excess, and ultimately ruin. For Aeldari, society was built on extremes. Their greatest pleasure was the hunt, taking down prey far more powerful than themselves. Creatures whose very essence sang to their hyper-tuned senses. The Aeldari were obsessed with sensations beyond mortal comprehension, with sights and sounds and tastes and smells so refined that only the most dedicated aesthetes could hope to experience them. And so as the centuries passed, the Aeldari became ever more refined, ever more obsessed with pleasure, until they lost all sense of balance. Meanwhile, other races across the galaxy felt the effects of this Aeldari decadence. For the hyper-tuned senses of the Aeldari meant they had become extremely sensitive to psychic energies, allowing them to tune into the thoughts and emotions of billions across the galaxy. And what they found was a vast sea of pathetic little worm-like creatures squirming around in the muck of their own filth, a race that had yet to ascend to the heights of Aeldari civilization. And as the millennia passed, the Aeldari began to grow bored with their own perfection. Their minds, unchallenged and overstimulated, began to seek out new sensations, darker, more intense sensations. Soon, whole fleets of Aeldari warships were disappearing into the warp, returning with slaves from newly conquered worlds that were crushed and twisted and distorted, much like the realm from which they came. But the Aeldari found this disturbing. To them, the warp was nothing more than a playground, a place to indulge their darkest desires without consequence. And so it was that the Aeldari unwittingly gave birth to the embodiment of excess and the harbinger of the fall. The moment that Slaanesh came into being, the universe tilted on its axis. The fall had begun. Across the galaxy, trillions of Aeldari souls were consumed in an instant, leaving behind only a handful of craftworlders, harlequins, and some fled to the safety of the Webway, an extra-dimensional realm of pure psychic energy. Others sought refuge in the cold, dead realm of the far future. Still, others clung to the ways of the old, worshipping the extinct gods of their ancestors and shunning the excesses of their decadent past. And then there were the Drukhari, or Dark Eldar, as they are more commonly known, a name given to them by their enemies, and which they embraced as a symbol of their new purpose, a people reborn from the ashes of their empire, forged in the fires of Slaanesh, and tempered in the depths of the Webway. When Slaanesh devoured the Aeldari, their souls did not go to waste. Rather, they were flung into the Webway, trapped in a liminal realm between life and death, a realm where the rules of physics bent to the will of the most powerful psychic. It was here that the Drukhari learned to survive, honing their latent psychic powers and turning the Webway itself into a weapon. Over the millennia, they carved out a domain within the Webway, a twisted parody of their former empire. They built cities on the bones of their ancestors, monuments to a dead past, and at the heart of it all, the magnificent city of Commorragh, a spire-studded metropolis wreathed in shadow and flame. The Drukhari thrived in Commorragh, preying on the souls trapped in the Webway and selling rare and exotic slaves to the highest bidder. But while the Drukhari were masters of the Webway, they were far from safe, for the Webway is a dangerous place, filled with demons and mutant creatures warped by the very essence of the warp. And so the Drukhari were forced to fight, not only for territory but for their very survival. And in time, they grew tired of living in the shadows. Now, they wanted more than just scraps of power and influence. They wanted it all. This is the tale of the Drukhari, as told by an anonymous user. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a like and subscribe for more. The Dark City is an impossible city. It sprawls through the Webway, a realm of pure psychic energy, a place where the very nature of reality is fluid. The Dark City is timeless and ageless, trapped forever in a state of decay. Within its spires and spidery bridges dwell the Drukhari, a society that has embraced the most repugnant aspects of the human condition, a civilization built on nothing but power, fear, and the pursuit of suffering. Forget about hope, nobility, or compassion. In this realm, only the cruel and the ambitious survive. The Drukhari are divided into 3 sub-factions, each more depraved than the last. The Kabals are the closest thing the Drukhari have to a ruling class, though the term ruling class is used very loosely here. Each Kabal is an aristocratic dynasty, a cabal of archons, who vie for power with one another, and each archon rules over their domain with a rod of iron, exploiting their subjects and backstabbing their rivals at every opportunity. But even the archons must tread carefully, for there are forces far more powerful than any cabal at work within the Dark City. Forces that'll stop at nothing to spread their vile influence across the Webway. The Drukhari are a cruel and decadent people, and their empire is a monument to excess and depravity. If you thought the ruling dynasties of Earth's past were bad, then you haven't met the Drukhari. The Dark City is like a festering tumor on the face of the universe, a place where the very air is thick with the stench of decay. Towers of black glass scrape at the sickly light that filters down from the Webway's surface, casting long, distorted shadows across the ground. Below, the streets are a labyrinth of impossible angles and choking fumes. The buildings pressed ever inward towards a colossal, gaping maw, a void that consumes all light and sound. At the center of the city, few dare even speak of it, let alone look upon it, for it is said that the very sight will drive a person insane. Yet for all its gloom and horror, there is a strange beauty to the Dark City, a macabre elegance that is impossible to ignore. Crumbling statues of forgotten gods loom over the rooftops, their features eroded by the passage of time and the relentless psychic storms that batter the Webway. In the fading light, you can just make out the shapes of monstrous creatures frozen in mid, their fangs bared and claws extended as if about to pounce. But they are only statues, or are they? Are there things that stir within the hearts of men, things that lurk in the darkest corners of the soul? Then come closer and listen carefully, for you might just hear their whispers carried on the wind. Here in the Dark City, there are no laws, no mercy, only the cold calculus of power. To survive here, you must be ruthless and cunning, always looking out for yourself because no one else will. Betrayal is a way of life here, and your enemies are legion. Every smile is a lie, every handshake a deceit, every glance a veiled threat. Here, trust is a weakness, and suspicion as a virtue. Welcome to Commorragh, to Dark City, where the only rule is to survive. You thought the gladiatorial games of old were brutal. You haven't seen anything yet. For here in Commorragh, the entire city is a battleground. In the grand arenas of the Wych Cults, the rules are simple. There are no rules. The victors of these contests are as brutal and merciless as the weapons they wield, tearing their victims limb from limb with vicious efficiency. Blood and agony are the currency of this realm, and only the strong survive. The weak are discarded like broken toys, left to wander the fetid streets or become the playthings of some depraved noble. But even this is not the worst of it. For in the darkest depths of the city, beyond the veil of even the coarsest taverns and dens of vice, there are places where humanity is violated in its most intimate and vulnerable form. Here in the haunted halls of the Haemonculi Covens, the surgeons sculpt flesh like it's clay, twisting and warping it to their heart's desire. Their tools are as sharp and unfeeling as the edges of a nightmare, and their experiments will make you question the very meaning of pain. Is there such a thing as immortality? What is the price of eternal life? What does it mean to be human? These are the questions that the Wych cultists seek to answer, and the results are as horrifying as they are enlightening. What do you think? What would you do? How would you survive in a place like this? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to see more Warhammer 40K lore videos, check out the playlist. Thank you so much for watching. Who is Vect, and why should you care? Well, if Commorragh is a nightmare, then Vect is the dreamer, and all others live only at his mercy. His rise to power was anything but meteoric. For centuries, he was just another up-and-coming warlord in the sprawling and ever-shifting Dark City, trying to carve out his own territory and build up his own power base. But Vect was more cunning than most, and while his rivals, the other Kabals, were busy fighting each other for scraps of land and resources, he was making his own moves. He slowly chipped away at their dominance by picking off their allies, destabilizing their supply lines and turning their own people against them. It was a slow and brutal process, but it was effective, and one by one, he brought the entire city under his heel. And so Vect became the undisputed ruler of Commorragh. Save for one small detail. Technically, the throne of the Dark City doesn't actually belong to him. In truth, it belongs to whoever controls the most Webway gates. The lifeblood of Commorragh flows through these gates. Raw, psionic energy harvested from the imitation. It's a power source that drives the entire city and its inhabitants insane with its untamed power. So naturally, the various warlords fight tooth and nail for control of them. The current holder of the throne is Vect, the most cunning and ruthless Kabal of them all, who has enslaved entire races just to get his hands on some Webway gates. Yeah, Vect rules Commorragh, which means he also gets to play King of the Hill, and his power is such that no one has been able to dislodge him from this position for years, decades, maybe even centuries. No one really knows because no one keeps track. Time doesn't really flow in the same way in the warp. But here's the thing about Vect. He didn't just seize the throne and call it a day. Oh no, he went all in. As soon as he took the reins of the city, he got to work reshaping it in his own image. He built new districts, restructured trade routes, instituted sweeping reforms. Basically, he took what was a bunch of disparate fiefdoms and turned it into a proper functioning city. At least as far as a city ruled by sadistic, power-hungry monsters can be considered proper and functioning. Under Vect's rule, Commorragh began to thrive like it never had before. Trade flourished, the Webway gates hummed with power, and the coffers of the ruling Cabal swelled with gold. Now, part of this prosperity came at the expense of other Kabals. Vect wasn't above using underhanded tactics or straight-up murder to get what he wanted. But the truth is, he didn't just take what he wanted. He made it so that everyone benefited from his rule. And that's why his Cabal, the Cabal of the Black Heart, still sits on the throne of Commorragh. They've been there so long that they've become a kind of royalty in all the worst ways the term implies. Oh, sure, there have been rebellions. There always will be. The past century saw the so-called rebellion of the other Kabals, an attempt by Vect's rivals to take back control of the city and, kill him. But it was brutally crushed. Now, Vect is said to have unleashed a terrible curse upon the city in response. warping the very fabric of space-time and dooming any who opposed him. In the aftermath, Commorragh was plunged into darkness and despair, and Vect's enemies were utterly routed. And that's just one of the many, many stories that have made Vect something of a folk hero to the citizens of Commorragh. He's basically a god among monsters, a title that he wears like a crown. So no, he's not immortal. But if you lived in Commorragh, you might think he is. Because if you're living under his rule, you're living on borrowed time. And when the great Cabal Lord decides your time is up, well, there's nothing you can do about it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the channel, consider dropping a like. Maybe even leaving a comment if you've got some free time on your hands. There are few things more entertaining than watching someone die. Well, that is to say gracefully. A good death has always been something of an art form. The way the victim's life ebbs away, the final expression on their face, the blood that paints the Colosseum floor. It's all part of the performance. And no one knows the value of a good performance more than Lelith Hesperax, the greatest gladiatrix the galaxy has ever seen. She is the perfection of murder as performance, a dancer of death who spins and weaves through battle, leaving only corpses in her wake. And if that sounds terrifying to you, then you haven't really grasped just how terrifying she is. The Dark Eldar love nothing more than pain and suffering. That's why they built the most depraved colosseums the galaxy has ever seen. Not to watch contests of skill or strength, or even cunning, mind you, but to watch as slaves brought from the worlds they've conquered fight to the death. Blood sport is all very well when the participants are equals, when the contest is fair. But the Dark Eldar don't cater to such quaint notions. Their games aren't about competition or glory. They're about power and humiliation. As far as the Dark Eldar are concerned, there can be no greater humiliation than being forced to fight another person to the death for the amusement of the crowd. But Lelith revels in it, taking the humiliation of the gladiatorial combat and turning it into high art. Her every move is designed not just to kill, but to degrade to the humanisa, to make the victim suffer as much as possible before the final merciful release of death. To do that, she needs no fancy armor or weapons. Her bare hands and feet are enough. Yet few have ever lived who could hope to best her in the ring, for Lith is undefeated. No one has ever bested her in single combat, and many have tried. There are legends of champions from across the galaxy who sought to test themselves against her and failed. Some say she dances through battle so gracefully that it seems almost divine, which might be true. After all, no one has ever seen her die. Many of her victims have gone insane simply by staring into the abyss of her eyes, and those who have fought her claim she seems to draw power from their fear. Growing stronger and more graceful the more terrified her opponents become. Most accounts of her fighting career are little more than campfire tales. Stories told by terrified slaves about the superhuman Glatrix, who rules the arenas of Commorragh with an iron fist and a cruel smile. These stories have coalesced into a kind of myth, one that has turned Lelith into something of a goddess of blades in the minds of the Dark Eldar. So it is said that when she walks through the streets of their great cities, the crowds part before her like the Red Sea, and the finest warriors in the city stand ready to do battle for her amusement. And when she takes her seat in the royal box at the great games, all noise and laughter cease, and the crowd falls silent, watching in awe as she dances among the vipers, taking the life out of each opponent with effortless grace. They say that when she has claimed a particularly noble victim, she will cut off their head and use it as a cup to drink from, laughing as the blood of the vanquished warrior mingles with her dark ale. Even the most depraved of the Dark Eldar find something deeply disturbing about that image. Some say she hunts the mightiest warriors in the galaxy, seeking out the greatest champions of the different races so she can add their souls to her collection. Others claim that she is already the mistress of pain, the greatest source of torment in the Dark Eldar's twisted pleasure halls. According to legend, she is as beautiful as she is deadly, with skin as white as bone and hair like spun moonlight. Her eyes are pools of liquid shadow, and her lips curl into a smile that promises nothing but agony. She is said to dress in the finest silks and velvets, jewels and gold, moving through the decadent halls of the Dark Eldar cities like a queen. And yet despite her beauty and her grace, no one has ever been able to resist her. For Lelith Hesperax is a force of nature, a predator that stalks the night, and she shows no mercy. Her artistry is measured not in brushstrokes or song, but in the elegance of a dying scream. If you enjoyed this, then check out the series in the description. Let's get ready to meet one of the most iconic villains in the Warhammer 40K universe. Urien Rakarth, the most infamous Haemonculi, the master of pain and the creator of living nightmares. His twisted experiments have given the Dark Eldar a new lease on life, but at what cost? What is Urien Rakarth's gift to the Dark Eldar, and how did he rise to become the most feared healer in the galaxy? Let's find out in today's episode of Warhammer Explained. Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, and today we're going to be taking a look at the twisted history of the most notorious homunculus in the Dark Eldar society, Urien Rakarth. The homunculus are a group of sadistic and highly skilled healers in the Dark Eldar society. They are the masters of biology and spiritual torment, capable of inflicting excruciating pain and unimaginable horrors on their victims. Homunculus are also known for their distinctive appearance, which includes a mask-like face with glowing red eyes and skin that is stretched and distorted into a grotesque parody of a human form. They are a terrifying sight to behold, and their mere presence is enough to strike fear into the hearts of even the most hardened soldiers. But what makes the Hemomancers truly unique is their ability to manipulate the very essence of life itself. They can heal the sick and wounded with a touch, but they can also inflict terrible curses that can twist a living being into a horrifying monster. Some of the most common tools used by the homunculus include blades that can cut through flesh and bone with ease, masks that can amplify their psychic powers, and strange, otherworldly plants that can be used to create potent poisons or control the minds of their victims. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the homunculus is their complete lack of empathy. They take great pleasure in inflicting pain and suffering on others, and they are completely unapologetic about their actions. They believe that pain is the only true reality and that those who cannot embrace it are weak and pathetic. The homunculus are a fascinating and terrifying addition to the Warhammer 40K universe. They are a reminder that there are some things in the galaxy that are far worse than death. Now let's get back to the story of Urien Rakarth. Urien Rakarth was born in the Dark Eldar homeworld of Commorragh, and from an early age he displayed a fascination with the darker aspects of magic and an aptitude for inflicting pain. He was taken under the wing of a powerful Archon and trained in the ways of the Dark Eldar. As a young warrior, Rakarth proved to be a skilled duelist and a ruthless killer. He reveled in the fear and pain he inflicted on his victims, and was known for his sadistic and merciless nature. However, Rakarth's true genius lay in his ability to manipulate the warp. He was able to tap into the darkest emotions of his victims, such as fear and pain, and use them to enhance his own powers. This made him a formidable opponent in battle, as he could not only harm his enemies physically, but also psychologically. As Rakarth grew in power, he became increasingly obsessed with the concept of immortality. He believed that the Dark Eldar were doomed to a cycle of pain and suffering, and that there had to be a way to break free from it. His obsession led him to perform increasingly risky and dangerous experiments, and he soon gained a reputation as a heretic and a madman. The Dark Eldar authorities took notice of Rakarth and his activities, and they sent a delegation to his lab to investigate. However, as the delegation entered Rakarth's domain, they were horrified by what they saw. They witnessed firsthand the extent of Rakarth's madness and the danger he posed to the entire race. Despite the obvious threat he represented, the delegation was unable to arrest Rakarth. He was simply too powerful and too well protected by his followers. Instead, the delegation returned to the authorities and demanded that the entire sector be locked down. The Dark Eldar Supreme Council convened an emergency meeting to discuss the situation, but they were unable to come up with a solution. In the end, they decided to do the unthinkable. They declared Urien Rakarth High Hemlock, effectively giving him the title of the most powerful healer in the Dark Eldar society and granting him control over the entire medical infrastructure of Commorragh. This gave Rakarth the power he needed to continue his research without interference, and he wasted no time in putting it to use. Rakarth continued to experiment with the dark arts, and he eventually developed a process that allowed him to transfer the consciousness of a dying Dark Eldar into the body of a genetically engineered creature. This creature was a hybrid of several different species, including the Dark Eldar, the Necron, and the Old Ones. It was created specifically to be a vessel for the consciousness of a dying Dark Eldar, and it was known as a thrall. By transferring the consciousness of a dying Dark Eldar into a thrall, Rakarth was able to cheat death and create a form of twisted immortality. However, this process was not without its drawbacks. The thralls were often unstable and unpredictable, and they were driven by an insatiable hunger for souls. In spite of the risks, the Dark Eldar nobility flocked around, eager to cheat death and secure their place in eternity. Rakarth reveled in his newfound power, and he used it to great effect during the wars against the other factions of Slaanesh. In battle, he would often lead from the front, delighting in the fear and pain he inflicted on his enemies. And so, Urien Rakarth became the most infamous homunculus in the history of the Dark Eldar. His thirst for knowledge and power knew no bounds, and he continued to experiment with the dark arts until his death. And even in death, his legacy lived on through the thralls that he had created. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. And if you want to watch more Warhammer Explained videos, you can do so here. Until next time, may your dice rolls be critical and your minis be painted. The endless wars of the 41st millennium are fought across a galaxy spanning greater than 39,000 light years, in an era that has lasted 1 million years. In this war, whole star systems can be broken apart and devoured in a matter of moments. And yet, even in this grim darkness, there are those who hunt beyond the grave, and none so terrifying as the Dark Eldar, or so it would seem. For while imperial worlds might fall and rise again under the light of the Emperor, few can claim to have been truly destroyed. But no such mercy is afforded to those unfortunate enough to fall into the clutches of the Dark Eldar, whose raids into the wider galaxy are a one-way trip from which no soul returns. For the Dark Eldar, there is no honor in war, only sport. And with each passing century, their sadistic games become more elaborate and deadly. To experience the full flavor of terror, they will often take their time to torment their victims before delivering the killing blow, reveling in the knowledge that the victim's fate is sealed and all hope is lost. Entire worlds have been known to cower in the face of a descending Dark Eldar fleet, offering up their best and brightest to be taken as sacrifices or playthings. Such was the fate of the world of Tyrant, a verdant jewel of a planet consumed by Slaanesh during the event known as the Devouring of Tyrant. In the days leading up to the attack, the Dark Eldar had scouted the planet, selecting key individuals who were then abducted from their homes in the night. When the main fleet arrived, these individuals were brought forth as offerings to the Dark Prince and the greatest of the Dark Eldar nobility feasted upon the souls of the captives, bathing in the exquisite agony their presence caused. The remaining populace of Tyrion were left to watch and suffer, knowing that soon it would be their turn to be hunted. This dark ritual complete, the Dark Eldar unleashed their full fury upon the planet, and what followed can only be described as a blood sport. With their prey selected, the Dark Eldar unleashed terrible weapons and beings upon the surface of Tyrant, including the dreaded raiders and the grotesques. These creatures revel in close combat, tearing their victims limb from limb with bared teeth and cruel blades. Then came the dreaded incubi, whose very presence drove men to madness and lust. Finally, the great lords and ladies of the Dark Eldar themselves descended into the fray, hunting the mightiest warriors and most potent psychers of the defenders for their own amusement. Whole cities were leveled, and entire armies routed. None escaped the attentions of the Dark Eldar, and none survived. By the end, the devouring had brought Slaanesh great pleasure. Yet, even as the Dark Eldar departed, taking their prisoners with them to be tortured and used as sacrifices on the demon world of Slaanesh, seeds of doubt were cast across the galaxy. Whispers arose that perhaps the Dark Eldar were not the galaxy's greatest predators after all, but merely its most desperate survivors. For in the grim darkness of the far future, there are those who hunt out of necessity and those who do so for sport. Which are the Dark Eldar? Are they the most feared race in the galaxy, striking terror into the hearts of their foes before they even unsheath their blades? Or is there something more to their brutal and bloody campaigns, some deeper desperation driving their need to hunt? Or perhaps both are true. The Dark Eldar fight, not just for survival, but for sport, reveling in the terror they inflict. They are the galaxy's greatest predators and its most desperate survivors. Now check out the links below for more on the Dark Eldar and their horrific practices. Or click here to learn about the Sisters of Battle, who have faced the Dark Eldar in grim and terrible battles. The curse of Slaanesh. Every Drukhari soul is slowly consumed unless they feed on the torment of others. The galaxy sees them as monsters, but at their core, they are victims of their own immortality. They cannot change. They cannot repent. They can only endure. The Dark Eldar will never know peace, nor salvation, nor even death. They are shadows clinging to a dying flame, stretching long across eternity. And somewhere in the darkest alleys of Commorragh, a scream rises, not of despair, but of joy. For in suffering, the Dark Eldar live on. But what if the tables were turned? What if the nightmare that haunted the Dark Eldar became their reality? What if the whispers of chaos took form and the darkness consumed its devourers? In the heart of Commorragh, Vect sat upon his obsidian throne, his 4 arms, each holding a different prize, a trophy of power taken from a victim of his sadistic games. The Lord of Pain, as he was known throughout the galaxy, had risen to even greater heights of sadistic pleasure in the millennia since the fall of the Dark Eldar. He ruled over 1 million screaming souls in his great fortress city, drawing strength from their tormented cries. The Dark City was a monument to suffering, and it sustained him, nurtured him, made him powerful. Yet something was amiss. There was a discord in the wails of agony that reached him, a dissonance in the screams that sustained him. Vect could not abide such imperfection. With unnatural speed, he was out of his throne room and through the labyrinthine streets of the Dark City. Following the source of the discord, it led him to an alley where 2 figures stood locked in combat. One was a warrior, clad in black and green armor, his face hidden behind a horned helmet. His blades sang as he fought, moving with unnatural grace and speed. His opponent was weaker, a young female warrior whose armor was dented and torn. Her face was streaked with grime and blood, and her dark skin was sickly pale. She gasped for breath, her movements growing slower and weaker with each passing moment. Enough, Vect boomed, and the fight instantly stopped. He reached out with a hand and the female warrior crumpled to her knees before him. With a twist of his wrist, he pulled a long, thin blade from the folds of her armor. It was dull and useless, and he tossed it aside. "You disappoint me," he hissed, turning to the male warrior. "This is no way to settle a dispute. Where is your honor? Where is your style?" The male warrior shrugged out of his helmet, revealing the handsome features of a young male Eldar. "I was merely protecting her. My lord, she is my sister." This one would have killed her. "Such sentimentality is weakness," Vect said, waving a dismissive hand. "And yet you allow yourself to be swayed by it. Do I sense a lack of devotion to our glorious mistress, Pain?" The Eldar recoiled slightly, fear dawning in his eyes. "My devotion to Slaanesh is absolute," he said quickly. "I swear it on the shards of my soul." Vect leaned back, savoring the fear. "Then prove it. Avenge your sister and kill the one who did this to her." The male warrior looked down at his fallen sister and then back to Vect. With a deep breath, he vanished in a swirl of black and green energy. He reappeared atop a nearby building, and when he moved again, he was bathed in the green glow of Slaanesh's power. The armor he wore was no longer dull and lifeless. It hummed with dark energy. His blade was no longer thin and useless. It crackled with demonic power, and when he struck, his opponent was enveloped in a cocoon of writhing tentacles. As the creature within thrashed and screamed in agony, Vect smiled. Yes, this was more like it. This was entertainment. This was exquisite. For a moment, the Eldar lost himself in the joy of the hunt. He reveled in the power surging through him, the power that came from the concentrated screams of millions of damned souls. He laughed, a sound that echoed through the Dark City, a sound that was answered by another laugh, a deeper, more resonant sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The Eldar faltered, his guard dropping for just a heartbeat. That was all the opening Vect needed. In a flash of movement, he was upon the Eldar, his forearms a blur of motion as he wrenched at the energies that bound the creature within. With a final roar, the cocoon shattered and Vect stood triumphant, as the last vestiges of Slaanesh's influence drained away, leaving the Eldar weak and broken before him. So the tables had turned. Now the hunter had become the hunted. Now the predator would become prey. Now the Dark Eldar would know true fear. But in the Webway, shadows shift, and even tyrants like Vect cannot rule forever.